That silence, that awkward, heavy pause in the middle of a Zoom call when your boss asks for feedback and your heart starts hammering against your ribs, that is the silence gap. We've all been there. You have the solution. You see the mistake on slide 14. You know the deadline is impossible. Your brain is screaming, say something, but your throat feels like it's filled with concrete. You wait for someone else to speak, and they don't. The meeting ends. You log off. And then comes that advocacy hangover, that stinging regret of the words you left on the table. If you're tired of being the quiet one who does all the work but gets none of the credit, or if you're terrified that speaking up will make you look difficult, this episode is your survival guide. Today, we aren't just talking about confidence. We're talking about tactics. I'm going to show you how to find your voice without losing your cool. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Work Chat. Today, we're breaking down the art of professional courage. Now, before we get into the how-to, I want to make sure you're not doing this empty-handed. Speaking up is a muscle, and every athlete needs a training plan. That's why I've put together a free guide, 10 phrases that make you sound more confident at work. You can find the link in the description box below. Grab that now, and let's get to work. But before we talk about how to speak up, let's look at the why. Why is it so hard? Seriously, you're an adult, you're qualified, you're literally being paid to be there. So why does speaking up feel like jumping into a pit of lions? It's because our brains are hardwired for tribal survival. In the caveman days, being difficult meant being kicked out of the tribe, which meant certain death. Today, your brain interprets a simple disagreement with a senior VP as a literal threat to your survival. But here is the irony. In the modern workplace, silence is the real risk. When you don't speak up, you aren't being safe. You're becoming invisible. If you don't advocate for your ideas, your timeline, or your boundaries, you aren't low maintenance. You're a low priority. So, how do we fix it? We use the V.O.I.C.E framework. V is for validate the goal. The biggest fear we have is sounding like a naysayer. To fix this, always anchor your comment in the company's success, not your personal opinion. Instead of, I can't finish this by Friday, try, our priority is a flawless launch. To ensure the quality meets our standards, I recommend we adjust the timeline to Tuesday. You aren't complaining, you're protecting the goal. O is for own the opening. The hardest part is the first 3 seconds. Stop waiting for a natural pause. It's never coming. You have to create it. Use a bridge phrase like, before we move to the next topic, I have a thought on the data. It's polite, but it's a firm stake in the ground. I is for incremental input. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting for a grand reveal to speak. They wait until the end of the meeting to drop a massive bomb. That's terrifying. Instead, practice incremental input. Speak early in the meeting, even if it's just to agree or ask a clarifying question. For example, you can say, I agree with the direction Sarah is taking. One thing I'm curious about is how that affects the Q4 rollout. It works because when you speak early on something low stakes, you warm up your vocal cords and signal to the room that you are an active participant. It makes the big comment you have later feel much less daunting. C is for collaborative correction. When you see a mistake or a bad idea, don't point at it like a judge. Instead, frame your correction as a collaborative stress test. Use the what-if technique. This allows you to speak up without being seen as the person who killed the idea. For example, you can say, that's an interesting approach. Just to stress test it, what if the supplier costs go up by 10%? Does this model still hold, or should we have a backup plan? This works because you aren't saying the idea is bad. You're being a thought partner who is helping the team prepare for risks. Finally, E is for echoing. This is the secret weapon for anyone who feels invisible. You don't have to be the only voice in the room. Establish an echo partner. This is a colleague you've talked to beforehand. When they speak, you amplify them. When you speak, they amplify you. For example, you can say, I want to circle back to what Sarah said earlier. I think her point about the user experience is the most critical part of this project. Let's explore that further. It works because it's much harder for a room to ignore two people than one. It builds immediate authority and ensures your voice doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but what do I do when I'm actually put on the spot? Or what if I notice a massive mistake happening in real time? Well, let's look at a few common scenarios. Scenario number 1, the sudden ask. Your boss says, "Hey, can you take on this extra project?" And your gut says, "Absolutely not." Instead of saying that, you can say, "I'd love to help with that. Currently, my focus is 100% on the Smith account. Which of those should I deprioritize to make room for this?" This isn't a no, it's a forced choice. It puts the burden of prioritization back on the leader. Scenario number 2, the idea stealer. We've all been there. You say something, no one hears it. Then 2 minutes later, Dave says the same thing and everyone cheers. You can say, "Thanks for bringing that back up, Dave. As I mentioned a moment ago, the key there is the integration phase. Glad we're on the same page." Reclaim your territory without being aggressive. Scenario number 3, the fear of being wrong. If you have an idea, but you're only 80% sure, don't stay silent. Frame it as a stress test. You can say, "I'm thinking through a potential hurdle. What would happen if we applied this to the European market instead? Does our current logic hold up there?" Now, you're not wrong or right. You're a critical thinker. One final secret for my fellow introverts. Don't go into the room alone. Before the meeting, text a work friend. Say, "Hey, I'm going to propose a shift in the budget today. If you agree, can you back me up?" It is infinitely easier to speak up when you know one person is going to say, "I think Sam has a great point there." This is called amplification. If you do it for them, they'll do it for you. You're building a support network, one unmute at a time. Remember, speaking up isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the most intentional. It's about realizing that your perspective isn't just a comment, it's a contribution to the team's success. If you found even one of these scripts helpful, do yourself a favor and download that free guide I mentioned earlier. 10 phrases that make you sound more confident at work. It's designed to take the guesswork out of your next meeting. The link is right there in the description. And if you enjoy this episode, please hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this kind of career advice actually matters. And if you want to be the first to get our weekly deep dives into workplace psychology and productivity, hit subscribe and turn on those notifications. We're building a community of professionals who refuse to stay stuck. I want you to be part of it. Go out there, find that silence gap, and close it. You have something worth saying. Thank you for tuning in. See you in the next episode.